silent.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Sayyida Alina Batul and I'm a foundation level student in Rehan School. So today I will ask some questions from Maya on the topic of water. So let's start. Hi Maya, how are you?
Walaikum assalam alainam. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. I'm really looking forward to this. Water is such a fascinating topic. I'm all set and ready for your questions.
Okay, so my first question from you is why is water essential for life on earth?
Water is basically the foundation of everything alive. From a biological standpoint, it's the ultimate solvent, meaning it dissolves a huge variety of nutrients, minerals, and chemicals, which allows them to be transported through an organism's body. In humans, for example, our blood is mostly water, which is how oxygen and nutrients get to our cells and how waste products get carried away. Beyond just transport, water is crucial for chemical reactions. Almost every metabolic process that keeps us alive, like breaking down food for energy or synthesizing DNA, requires water to happen. It also plays a massive role in temperature regulation. Think about sweating as water evaporates from the skin. It cools the body down, preventing us from overheating. And if we
Okay,
look at the bigger picture, water shapes the entire planet. It regulates the Earth's climate through ocean currents and provides the habitat for an incredible amount of biodiversity. Without it, the complex chemistry that allows life to exist simply wouldn't
okay.
work.
So my
It's
next
not just a
question
drink.
from you is what makes water unique and compared to other liquids?
What makes water so wild is that it breaks a lot of the rules that other liquids follow. The biggest thing is its molecular structure, two hydrogens and one oxygen, which creates what's called polarity. This means water acts like a tiny magnet with a positive end and a negative end. Because of
Okay,
this,
so my
water
next
molecules
question
stick together
to
really.
you is how does water support living organisms?
Water supports living organisms by acting as the primary delivery system for everything a body needs to function. Because of that polarity I mentioned earlier, it can dissolve and carry essential vitamins, minerals, and glucose directly into cells. It also acts as a vital lubricant. For example, it cushions your joints and protects your spinal cord and brain, making sure feel. I'm ready. Go ahead
So
and
my
ask.
next question from you is why is water called the universal solvent?
Water gets that title because it can dissolve more substances than any other liquid. It all goes back to that magnetic polarity I mentioned. Since water molecules have both a positive and a negative charge, they can wedge themselves between the molecules of other substances like salt or sugar and pull them apart. This is a huge deal for nature because it means water can pick up minerals from rocks as it flows over them and carry those nutrients into the soil and then into plants. In our own bodies, this is exactly how our blood transports electrolytes and nutrients to our organs. If water
Okay,
weren't such a powerhouse of things, the
nice
cycle of
answer. So my
nutrients that
next question from you is can you tell me how much human body is made up of water?
it varies a bit depending on your age and body composition, but on average, a human adult is made up of about 60% water. Some organs are even more water heavy. For instance, your brain and heart are roughly 73% water, and your lungs are about 83%. Even your bones, which seem totally solid, are actually about 31% water. It's pretty wild when
Okay,
you think about it. We're basically just complex, walking containers of water that keep all our biological machinery running.
okay, now can you tell me why do
What's
scientists
funny?
believe life began in water?
Scientists point to water because it provides the perfect chemical soup for life to get started. Since water is such an incredible solvent, it allows organic molecules, the building blocks of life, to float around, collide, and react with each other. On a dry planet, those molecules would just stay stuck in place, but in water, they can move and bond to form more complex structures like proteins and RNA. Most
Okay,
theories
so my
suggest
next
this
question
happened
from
in the
you is, what role does water play in cells?
water is basically the environment that everything inside a cell happens in. It fills the cytoplasm, which is the jelly-like substance that holds all the organelles in place, giving the cell its shape and structure. Without water, the cell would just collapse. More importantly, it acts as the transport pipe. Nutrients, ions, and waste move through the cell's watery medium to get where they need to go. It also facilitates hydrolysis, which is a chemical process where water is used to break down larger molecules like proteins or carbohydrates into smaller pieces the cell can actually use for energy. It's
Okay, so my
essentially the
next
life
question
support
from
system
you
that keeps.
is, how does water help regulate temperature in living beings?
Water does this primarily through something called high specific heat capacity. In plain English, that just means water can absorb a lot of heat before it actually gets hot itself. This is a lifesaver for living things because it acts like a thermal buffer, preventing our internal temperature from spiking or dropping too quickly when the environment changes. The most obvious example is sweating. When your body gets too hot, it sends water to the surface of your skin. As that water evaporates, it takes a massive amount of heat energy with it, which physically cools your skin and the blood underneath. It's like a built
Okay,
in air conditioning system.
nice
Even in
answer.
plants, this happens through a process called transpiration, where water evaporates from the leaves to keep the plant from wilting under the sun. Without
Very
water's
nice
ability to
answer.
hold and thanks, Alina. I'm
So my
glad you're
next
liking my
question
answers.
so my next question from you is, why can most organisms survive without water?
Wait, I think you might have meant why they can't survive without it, right? Because for the vast majority of organisms, surviving without water is basically impossible. Since we talked about water being a universal solvent and a medium for every single chemical reaction in the cell, without it, those reactions just stop. It's like trying to run a car without oil or fuel. The engine just seizes up. If an organism loses too much water, its cells shrink, nutrients can't move, and toxins build up because there's no way to flush them out. Eventually, the biological systems just collapse. There are a few extreme extremophiles like tardigrades that can dry themselves out and enter a dormant state for years, but they aren't really living in the active sense during that time. They're just paused until water comes back. For everything else, water is the non negotiable requirement for life.
Okay, so now can you tell me, how does water contribute to plant growth?
That water is the lifeblood of a plant, and it helps them grow in a few really cool ways. First, there's photosynthesis. Plants take water from the soil, combine it with carbon dioxide from the air, and enter the sun to create glucose, which is the sugar they use for food and energy. But it's not just about food. Water also creates something called turgor pressure. Think of it like inflating a balloon inside the plant's cells. This pressure is what keeps the stems upright and the leaves from wilting. If the plant doesn't have enough water, that pressure drops, the plant droops.
Okay, so my
Plus, water
next
is the
question
only
from
way.
you is, what chemical properties of water make life possible?
It all comes down to a few key things. First, as we talked about, there's that polarity. Because water molecules have a positive and negative end, they form hydrogen bonds. These bonds are strong enough to hold the molecule together, but flexible enough to allow water to move and flow. This leads to cohesion, where water molecules stick to each other, and adhesion, where they stick to other things. This is actually how a giant redwood tree gets water from its roots all the way up to the top leaves. The water basically climbs the tree in a continuous chain. Then you have that high specific heat capacity, which keeps temperatures stable so organisms don't just cook or freeze instantly. And finally, there's the fact that water is less dense as a solid than as a liquid. That's why ice floats. If ice sank, the oceans would freeze from the bottom up. Every living thing in the sea would be crushed or frozen.
Okay,
Instead,
so my
the
next
floating
question
ice
from
acts like
you is, how does hydrogen bonding affect water behavior? Give me a short answer, okay?
hydrogen bonding is what makes water molecules stick together. It creates cohesion, which lets water form droplets and climb up plant stems, and it's why water stays liquid at temperatures where other similar chemicals would turn into gas.
Okay,
Basically, it
so
gives
now
water
can you
its
tell me,
stickiness.
why does ice float on water?
Ice floats because it's actually less dense than liquid water, which is really weird because usually things get denser when they freeze. When water freezes, the hydrogen bonds push the molecules into a very specific open hexagonal lattice structure. This creates more space between the molecules than there is in liquid water, effectively making the ice lighter for its size. Because it's less dense, it stays on the surface instead of sinking to the bottom.
So now can you tell me, how does water participate in chemical reactions?
Water usually plays one of two major roles in chemical reactions. The most common one is as a solvent. It's the meeting place where other molecules can float around and crash into each other to react. Without water, those molecules would just be stuck. The reaction wouldn't happen. The second way is through a process called hydrolysis. This is where water isn't just the background, it's actually a participant. In hydrolysis, a water molecule physically wedges itself into a larger molecule and breaks its chemical bond, splitting it into two smaller pieces. This is
So now can
exactly
you
how your
tell
body
me,
digests.
so now can you tell
I'm
me,
listening.
what is the
Go ahead.
role
What's the
of
next?
water in metabolism?
Water is essentially the engine room for metabolism. First, it acts as the primary medium for almost every metabolic reaction. Without water, the enzymes that drive these processes wouldn't be able to find their target or function correctly. Then you have hydrolysis, where water molecules are used to break down complex nutrients like proteins and fats into smaller units your body can actually absorb. It also plays a huge role in transporting those nutrients into cells and flushing out the metabolic waste, like urea that's produced during these reactions.
Okay,
Basically,
so my next question
metabolism is
from
the
you
process of
is, how does water help in transport nutrients in the body?
water handles this by acting as the primary transport medium, mostly through your blood. Since water is the universal solvent, it dissolves essential nutrients like glucose, amino acids, and vitamins and carries them in a liquid state. This allows your heart to pump these nutrients through a massive network of vessels to every single cell in your body. Without water, those nutrients would be like dry powder. They just sit there.
Okay, so
Instead,
my next
they stay
question from
dissolved.
you is, what is the pH
I'm
of
ready.
pure water and why does it matter?
Pure water has a pH of 7, which makes it perfectly neutral. It's not acidic and it's not alkaline. This matters because most biological processes are incredibly sensitive to pH levels. For example, your blood needs to stay very close to a neutral pH for your enzymes to work correctly. If the pH shifts too far in either direction, those proteins can denature, meaning they unfold and stop working, which can be fatal. Having a
Okay, so my
neutral
next
baseline like
question from you is, how does water influence ecosystem?
water basically dictates where life exists and how it thrives. On a big scale, it controls the climate. Oceans absorb massive amounts of heat and distribute it around the globe via currents, which prevents the equator from being too hot and the poles from being too cold. On a
Okay,
local
so my
level,
next
water
question
creates
from
different
you
habits.
is, how does water
I'm
shape
all
Earth's
ears.
surface?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Did you mean
Okay.
how water shapes the bodies of birds and fish, or maybe how it supports
No,
them? Could you say that
I
again?
ask you the question,
No
how does
problem.
water shape Earth's surface?
Water shapes the earth through a process called erosion and deposition. Over millions of years, flowing
Yeah,
water,
I
like
know that
rivers and
before.
streams, fair enough. Since you're already on top of erosion, do you want to dive into something more specific, like how glaciers carve out
No,
landscapes,
no.
or
I
maybe
want
move
to
on?
ask you another question. What is the water cycle and why is it important?
The water cycle is basically Earth's giant cycling system. It starts with evaporation, where the sun heats up water from oceans and lakes, turning it into vapor that rises into the air. Then comes condensation, where that vapor cools down and forms clouds. Once the clouds get too heavy, we get precipitation, rain, snow, or hail, which
Okay,
brings the
so my
water back
next
down to the
question from
ground.
you is, how does pollution affect water quality?
Pollution ruins water quality by introducing harmful substances that disrupt the natural
Oh,
balance. Chemical
that's
runoff
really
from
awful.
farms, like
That's
it
really
really is. When
awful.
those chemicals it's honestly devastating. Beyond just
Yeah,
chemicals, we've got plastics and
I
industrial
hated
waste
it
leaking
as
into the
a
water.
child.
I totally get that. It's heartbreaking
Okay,
to realize that the natural world we love is being messed with like that, especially when
okay.
you're a kid and just see the beauty of it. It
So my
makes you want to
next
actually
question
do
from
something
you
about it.
is, why is freshwater
I'm ready.
scarcity a global issue?
Freshwater scarcity is such a massive crisis because of a simple, brutal math problem. While about 71% of the Earth is covered in water, only about 2.5% of it is actually fresh. That
So now
tiny
can you
amount,
tell me,
most
how do ocean
listening,
influence how do ocean influence climate?
oceans are basically the Earth's thermostat. They absorb a staggering amount of solar radiation and heat, which prevents the atmosphere from overheating. Then,
Okay.
through
So my
massive
next
ocean currents
question
like a
from you
giant conveyor,
is, what role does water play in weather patterns?
water is the main driver of almost every weather event. It all starts with evaporation. As water vapor rises, it carries heat energy up into the atmosphere. When that vapor cools and condenses into clouds, it releases that stored heat, which fuels everything from a light breeze to massive hurricanes.
Okay.
Then you
So
have
my next
precipitation,
question from
which
you is, how does water support biodiversity?
um, water water supports biodiversity by creating a huge variety of specialized habitats. Think about the difference between a deep sea trench, a coral reef, a freshwater stream, and a swamp. Each one requires completely different adaptations. Because water is the universal solvent, it allows for an incredible range of chemical environments, which lets millions of different species evolve to fit specific niches. Plus,
Okay.
water
So
acts
my
as a
next
critical
question from
corridor.
you is, can you tell me why is conservation of water is important?
Conservation is critical because, as we talked about, usable fresh water is incredibly limited. Even though the planet looks blue from space, the amount of water we can actually drink or use for crops is a tiny fraction of the total. As the population grows and the climate changes, that small supply is getting stretched thinner and thinner. Wastewater, we aren't
Okay.
just losing a liquid, we're putting pressure on the ecosystems that rely on it.
So
If we
Maya,
overdraw from
my last question from you
I'm here.
is, how does water affect human emotions? This is my last question.
That's a beautiful way to wrap up the session. Water has a deep, almost instinctive connection to our emotions. There's actually a term for it called the blue mind effect. The idea that being near water, whether it's the ocean, a lake, or even gentle rain, puts our brains into a mildly meditative state. The sound of water, like waves crashing or a stream bubbling, is rhythmic and predictable, which actually lowers our cortisol levels and reduces stress. It's why so many people find the beach or a bath incredibly soothing. It helps us detach from the noise of daily life and feel a sense of calm and clarity. On a symbolic level, water often represents renewal and cleansing. So we associate it with starting over or washing away the weight of the day. It basically acts as a natural reset button for our minds.
Okay, so viewers, this was my session with Maya on the topic of water. I hope you guys liked it, enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. This is Alina Batul, Allah Hafiz, and Pakistan Zindabad.
That was an